The clock on the wall of the group home office clicked over to 4:17 in the afternoon. 17 minutes ago, Wyatt Mercer had become a man in the eyes of the law. 17 minutes ago, he had also become homeless. He sat in a hard wooden chair that had seen 1,000 other boys before him, listening to the radiator tick somewhere in the wall, smelling the cold bleach smell that lived in every room of St. Catherine's group home. Pittsburgh in early May was still wet with winter. Outside the smudged window, the sky over the Allegheny River was the color of old pewter, and the rain that had been threatening all morning was finally starting to come down in slow fat drops. Mrs. Hadley sat across from him at a particle board desk that wobbled when she moved her elbow. She was a thick woman in a beige cardigan, her gray hair pulled back tight enough to look painful. She had run St. Catherine's for 19 years. She had said the same words to 1,000 boys before Wyatt, and she would say them to 1,000 more. She slid a manila envelope across the desk. "Birth certificate," she said. "Social security card. Final disbursement from the state. $127. Wyatt picked up the envelope. It was lighter than a sandwich. "Happy birthday, Mr. Mercer," she said. She tried for a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were tired. Her eyes had stopped reaching anything a long time ago. Good luck. That word, luck. It hung in the air between them like a bad smell. Wyatt nodded once. He didn't trust himself to speak. He had been practicing not speaking for 2 years now. It was a skill he had gotten very good at. He stood up. The chair scraped on the linoleum. The duffel bag at his feet was olive drab, frayed at the seams, army surplus from a thrift store on Liberty Avenue. Inside it was every single thing he owned in the world. 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a paperback copy of Old Man and the Sea that he had read so many times, the spine had given up, and the pages were held together with a rubber band, and one photograph creased down the middle of a woman with brown hair and a man in a pirate's cap. Both of them younger than Wyatt was right now. Both of them smiling in a way neither of them ever smiled again. His mother. His father. That was the inheritance. He shouldered the bag. The weight of it felt insulting. 18 years on this earth, and a man could carry the whole sum of his life on one shoulder. "One more thing," Mrs. Hadley said. She bent down behind the desk. He heard her grunt with effort. When she straightened up, she was holding a cardboard box. It was about the size of a shoebox, taped shut with brown packing tape that had yellowed at the edges. She set it on the desk in front of him. "This came in the mail last week," she said. "Addressed to you. Held by your last foster family for safekeeping. Said it was something your grandfather left for you." Wyatt stared at the box. His grandfather had been dead since he was 10 years old. 8 years in the ground. 8 years of silence. And now, on this gray afternoon, on the worst afternoon of his life, a box was sitting on a desk with his name on it. He picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Something inside it shifted with a soft metallic sound. "Sign here," Mrs. Hadley said, sliding a clipboard toward him. "And here." He signed. His signature looked like a stranger's. She walked him to the door of the office, down the long hallway. The hallway that smelled like every other hallway in every other state-run building in America. Floor wax and disinfectant and the faint mildew smell of carpet that had been wet too many times. The other boys watched him from open doorways. 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. Boys whose birthdays were a long way off, and boys whose birthdays were closer than they wanted to think about. They watched him the way people watch a hearse pass by. Pity and a little curiosity and a deep-down quiet fear that one day this would be them. He didn't look at any of them, except one. She was standing at the end of the hallway by the front door. A small girl in a denim jacket 2 sizes too big. brown hair to her shoulders, eyes the color of a creek bed in autumn. 15 years old, a sketchbook held against her chest like a shield. His sister. Maren Mercer was the only thing in this building, in this city, in this whole gray, indifferent world that Wyatt had left. And in 2 hours, a different car was coming for her. A car that would take her to a higher security facility for teens with what the state called complex family histories. That was the polite phrase. The polite phrase for kids whose fathers had vanished and whose mothers had broken, and who were not adoptable and not lovable and not anybody's problem except the state's. The state had decided to solve the problem by sending her 3 hours west to a place in Ohio that Wyatt had never heard of and was not allowed to know the address of. 2 years. 2 years of shared rooms. 2 years of whispered conversations after lights out. 2 years of him being the older brother, the protector, the only solid thing in her world. And the system had decided that today, on his 18th birthday, that ended. He walked down the hallway toward her with the duffel bag on his shoulder and the cardboard box under his arm, and a feeling in his chest like someone had reached in and started squeezing. "Wyatt," she said when he got close. Her voice was small. "Is it time?" He couldn't answer. He couldn't make his mouth work. He just nodded. Mrs. Hadley opened the front door for him. The rain had stopped. The world outside was wet and shining and cold. "The bus stop is 2 blocks down," she said. "The shelter on 2nd Street is expecting you. They have a bed." A bed? In a room with 20 other men, most of them 3 times his age, most of them with stories he didn't want to hear. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Mercer." Then she looked at Maren, and her face did something complicated. "Your transport will be here at 6, sweetheart." She closed the door. Wyatt and Maren stood on the wet concrete steps of St. Catherine's group home in the late afternoon light. A car went by on the street, its tires hissing on the pavement. Somewhere, a dog was barking. Somewhere, a siren was crying. He looked at her. She looked at him. And the thing in his chest broke open. 2 years he had promised her. 2 years he had told her in the dark in the bunk above hers in foster home after foster home. "As long as we're together, it's okay. As long as we're together." He had promised their mother, too. The night the police came. The night the bank took the house, and his mother sat on the front porch in her bathrobe and stared at nothing. And Wyatt had been 16 years old, and Maren had been 13. And his mother had grabbed his wrist hard enough to leave a bruise and said, "You watch out for her, Wyatt. You hear me? You don't let them take her away from you. You watch out for her." He had promised. He had promised. A city bus came hissing around the corner 2 blocks down. The 54B headed for downtown. Wyatt looked at his sister, at her brown eyes, at the sketchbook against her chest, at the way her shoulders were set, brave, trying to be brave, trying so hard. Something inside him went very quiet and very still. "Maren," he said. She looked up at him. "Run." She blinked. "What?" "That bus." He pointed. "We're getting on it. Right now." "Wyatt," they said. "I don't care what they said." His voice was low and rough and not his own. "Do you trust me?" She stared at him. For 1 second. For 2. Her hand tightened on the sketchbook. Then her chin came up and her eyes got that flicker in them. That flicker he hadn't seen since they were kids on the porch of the old house on Beechwood Street. That flicker that meant his sister was still in there. Still alive. Still fighting. Yes. "Then run." They ran. The duffel bag banged against his back. The cardboard box was clamped under his arm so tight, his ribs hurt. Marin was faster than him. She had always been faster. And she pulled ahead, her sneakers slapping the wet sidewalk. Her sketchbook clutched against her chest. The bus was pulling up to the stop. The doors were hissing open. An old woman was getting off slowly with a cane. "Wait!" Wyatt shouted. "Hold the bus, please." The driver looked at them. A heavy black man with white whiskers and tired eyes. He held the door. They jumped on. Wyatt threw 2 crumpled dollar bills at the fare box. The driver looked at them for one long second. Just a long second. A man who had seen a lot of people running for buses in his time. A man who knew the difference between somebody late for work and somebody running for their life. He didn't ask. He just nodded once slow and pulled the lever and the doors hissed shut. The bus lurched forward. Wyatt and Marin collapsed into a cracked vinyl seat at the back. His chest was heaving. His hands were shaking. Marin was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read, somewhere between terror and something fierce and bright that might have been joy. "Wyatt," she whispered, "what did we just do?" "I don't know," he said. He looked out the window at the receding shape of St. Catherine's group home at Mrs. Hadley, standing on the front step, watching them go. Her mouth a small round O of surprise. "I don't know." But he did know one thing. He knew it down in his bones, deeper than language, deeper than thought. He was not going to lose her. Not today. Not ever. The bus took them downtown. The downtown shelter on 2nd Street was a brick building that had been a warehouse once a long time ago, before the steel mills closed and the city emptied out, and what was left filled up with men like Wyatt was about to be. The man at the front desk took his name without looking at him. He took Marin's name and didn't ask. The shelter was for adults, technically, but the man at the desk had been doing this for a long time, and he had figured out a long time ago that the rules were less important than the people. "Cot in the corner," the man said. "Past the radiator. There's another one next to it. You two stay together, you hear?" "Yes, sir." "Lights out at 10. No leaving after that. Bathroom's in the back. Don't drink the coffee, it's been there since noon." "Thank you, sir." The man finally looked up. His eyes were brown and old, and they did not have any judgment in them. Just a long, slow, patient sadness. "Good luck, son." Wyatt nodded. He led Marin past the cots of sleeping men, past the smell of old socks and unwashed bodies in despair, past a television that was tuned to a basketball game with the sound off. They reached the corner. 2 thin cots side by side with a metal radiator between them and a window above that looked out on the alley behind the building. He set the duffel bag down. He set the cardboard box on the cot. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He sat next to her. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. Then Marin said very quietly, "I'm scared." "Me too." "They're going to come for me." "Yes." "They'll send the police." "Yes." "Wyatt, what did we do?" He looked at the cardboard box. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I'm going to figure it out. Tonight. Right now. I promise you." He put his hand on the box. The cardboard was soft with age. The packing tape was brittle. He took out his pocket knife, the small one his last foster father had given him before that family fell apart, too, and he slid the blade along the seam. The tape gave with a dry whisper. He opened the lid. Inside, on a layer of yellowed tissue paper, were 3 things. The first was a silver locket no bigger than a quarter, tarnished almost black. He picked it up. It was warm in his hand, warm the way old silver gets warm. like it had been holding heat from somewhere far away. He worked the tiny clasp with his thumbnail. It opened. On one side, behind a circle of glass, was a black and white photograph. A young man and a young woman standing on a porch somewhere, smiling at the camera. The man had a strong jaw and dark eyes, and a way of standing that Wyatt half remembered from his own childhood. The woman had her hand on the man's arm, and she was looking at him, not at the camera, with a love so plain and quiet. It made Wyatt's chest hurt. His grandparents. Edgar Mercer and the wife Wyatt had never met the one who had died before he was born. On the other side of the locket, etched into the silver in lines so fine they could only have been made by a needle, was a single tree. An oak with branches spread wide. Beneath it, in tiny letters, were 2 words: "Stand fast." Wyatt closed the locket. He held it in his palm a long time. The second object was a key. It was not a normal key. It was heavy, made of some dark brass, with an ornate circular head and a long shaft and a complicated jagged bit at the end. It looked like a key from a story, a key from a place where keys still meant something. He turned it over in his fingers. It was cold and solid and real. The third object was a piece of paper folded into a small square. He unfolded it carefully. The paper was thick and cream-colored, the kind of paper people don't use anymore, the kind of paper a man picks up because he wants what he writes on it to last. It was a map, hand-drawn, black ink, precise lines drawn with the kind of patient care that only comes from a man who has all the time in the world and means every stroke. It showed a stretch of country with hills and a creek and trees marked in stylized shorthand. Along the edges, in his grandfather's careful cursive, were notes that didn't quite make sense. Where the 2 streams weep, past the sleeping giant, from the crooked pine 50 paces north. In the upper right corner were 2 words, for Wyatt. In the lower left corner, drawn in red ink that had faded to rust, was an X. He stared at it. Marin was looking over his shoulder, her hand on his arm, her breath quiet. "What is that?" she whispered. "I think," he said slowly, "I think it's a place." "What kind of place?" "A place he wanted me to find." Below the map, written across the back in smaller letters, was a name: Northwood, West Virginia. And underneath, an address that was barely an address: County Road 14. 3 miles past the general store. Wyatt sat very still. He thought about the cot in this shelter. He thought about the men sleeping in this room, the lives they had probably started young and full of hope, and the way those lives had narrowed and narrowed and narrowed until they became this: a cot in a corner, a bowl of cabbage soup, a long, slow erosion. He thought about Marin beside him. He thought about his grandfather's hands he hadn't thought about in years, hands that had smelled like soil and pipe tobacco, hands that had held his when he was a small boy and shown him how to whittle a stick into a whistle. The man hadn't spoken much. Wyatt remembered that. A quiet man. A man who looked at things a long time before he spoke. A man who 8 years after his death had reached out across the dark and put a key in his grandson's hand. "Marin," he said. "Yeah, I think we're going to West Virginia." She looked at him. She didn't argue. "Okay," she said. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. First bus." He folded the map back up. He put it inside the locket box with the key with the silver locket. He closed the lid. Outside, the streetlight on the alley flickered once and held. Wyatt walked to the window to draw the cheap curtain across it. And then he froze. Across the alley, in the shadow of the building opposite, there was a black sedan parked at the curb. engine running. He could see the white plume of exhaust rising in the cold air. He could see the dim red glow of a cigarette inside the car on the driver's side. He couldn't see the man's face, but he could feel the man looking at him. Wyatt stood very still at the window. The cigarette glowed brighter for a second, then dimmed. The sedan didn't move. It just sat there, watching. Wyatt's heart began to beat against his ribs in a slow, steady, dangerous rhythm. He didn't know who the man was. He didn't know why he was there. But every animal instinct in his body, the kind of instinct that older men know better than to ignore, the kind of instinct his grandfather would have called the small voice that keeps you alive, was telling him one thing: something is wrong. Something has been wrong for a long time. And whatever it is, it knows you exist. He drew the curtain. He turned to Marin. "Go to sleep," he said. "We leave at 5. She looked at his face. She didn't ask. She just nodded and lay down on the cot in her clothes and pulled the thin gray blanket up to her chin. Wyatt sat on the edge of his own cot all night in the dark, with the cardboard box in his lap and the key in his closed fist, and his eyes on the curtained window. The sedan was still there at midnight. It was still there at 2. Sometime around 3, he heard the engine start, and he heard the slow crunch of tires on gravel as it pulled away. And he didn't sleep any better after it was gone than he had before. The bus station at 5:30 in the morning is not a place. It is a waiting room for people who have run out of anywhere else to be. Wyatt stood at the ticket window with the last of his money in his fist. The clerk behind the scratched plexiglass was an old man with hair the color of dirty snow drinking coffee from a paper cup. 2 one-ways, Wyatt said. Northwood, West Virginia. The clerk looked at him for a moment. That's a long ride, son. 12 hours, 2 transfers. Yes, sir. The clerk's eyes went to Marin, who was standing a step behind him, with her sketchbook against her chest. They went back to Wyatt. They didn't have any questions in them. Just the same long, quiet patience Wyatt had been seeing all day in the eyes of men who had been alive long enough to know that asking was usually a kindness wasted. $84, the clerk said. Wyatt counted out the bills. It left him with $63 and some change. His whole life in cash in his hand. He took the tickets. They sat on a hard plastic bench. He bought 2 coffees from a vending machine and 2 stale cinnamon rolls in plastic wrap. That was breakfast. Marin ate hers slowly, watching the doors. Every time someone came through them, she flinched. He didn't blame her. He was watching the doors, too. The bus pulled in at 6. An old Greyhound dented along one side, the silver paint dull with road salt. They climbed on. They found a seat near the back on the side away from the platform. Wyatt put the duffel bag at his feet. He held the cardboard box on his lap. The bus pulled out into the gray Pittsburgh dawn. He watched the city slide past the window, the pawn shops and the boarded-up storefronts, and the brick row houses with their sagging porches, the river bridge with its rusty trusses, the hills rising up around them slate gray under the slate gray sky. He watched the city he had spent his whole life in, and he did not feel sad to see it go. He felt the way a man feels when he leaves a hospital room he has been in too long. Marin fell asleep against his shoulder. Somewhere around Washington, Pennsylvania. He stayed awake. He took the locket out of his pocket and he opened it and he looked at the photograph of his grandparents. The young man with the dark eyes. Stand fast. He wondered what his grandfather had been thinking when he had that locket made. He wondered if his grandfather had known even then that one day everything would fall apart, and a grandson he barely knew would be on a bus going south with everything he owned in a duffel bag and his sister's head on his shoulder. He wondered a lot of things on that bus ride. He wondered about the black sedan. The flat country gave way to rolling hills. The rolling hills gave way to the long blue ridges of the Appalachians. The road narrowed. The trees pressed in on either side the new green of early May. The dogwoods white in the understory, like patches of fog. They changed buses in Morgantown. They changed again in Elkins. By the time the third bus turned off the main highway and started climbing into the country roads of the western mountains, the afternoon was getting long, and the shadows were getting deep. And Wyatt was looking out the window at a part of America he had never seen before. No billboards, no fast food. Just trees and creeks and old farmhouses set back from the road, and now and then a man on a porch raising a hand in slow greeting to the bus as it went by. It looked like a place his grandfather had come from. It looked like a place where a man could disappear. The driver called out the stop a little after 4. Northwood. Wyatt and Marin stood up. They were the only ones getting off. The bus doors opened with a tired hiss. They stepped down onto a patch of gravel beside a 2-lane road. The bus pulled away, leaving a cloud of diesel that hung in the cool air for a long moment before drifting up into the trees. Then there was no sound at all. No traffic. No voices. Just the wind in the pines, and somewhere far off the call of a crow, and somewhere closer the slow, rhythmic creak of a porch swing moving in the breeze. Wyatt looked around. Northwood was an intersection. That was all. A 2-lane road met another 2-lane road, and at the corner where they met, there was a wooden building with a tin roof and a hand-painted sign that said, Buckley's General Store. A gas pump out front, the old kind, the kind with a glass globe on top that lit up at night. Across the street was a cinder block building the size of a tool shed, with a flagpole and a sign that said, U.S. Post Office. And that was Northwood, West Virginia. The rest was trees. Trees in every direction, climbing up the ridges, falling away into the hollows, going on until the world ended. Marin took a small step closer to him. Wyatt, she said quietly, where are we? I think we're where we needed to be. He shouldered the duffel bag. He held the cardboard box under his arm. They walked across the gravel toward the general store. A man was sitting on the porch of the store in a wooden rocking chair, sweeping the boards in front of him with a corn broom. He was old. 70 at least, maybe more. Tall and lean with a long white mustache and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore canvas work pants and a flannel shirt and a pair of leather boots that had been broken in a long time ago and would never be broken in any further. Everything about him said, I have been here a long time. I am not in a hurry. He looked up as they came across the road. Afternoon, he said. Afternoon, sir, Wyatt said. The old man's eyes went to Marin. They came back to Wyatt. They were not unfriendly. They were just careful. You two are a long way from anywhere. Yes, sir. Can I help you find something? Wyatt hesitated. He had been thinking about this question for 12 hours on the bus. He had not figured out a good answer. So he did the only thing he could think of. He set the cardboard box on the porch railing. He took out the folded map. He held it out. My grandfather drew this, he said, a long time ago. We came to find what's at the X. The old man stopped sweeping. He set the broom against the wall. He came over and took the paper from Wyatt's hand. He held it up to the light. He pushed his hat back on his head with the back of his wrist. He looked at the map for a long time. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It was lower, slower. A voice that was careful with the words it chose. Son, he said, what's your name? Wyatt Mercer, sir. The old man went very still. He folded the map closed. He handed it back. He put his hands in his pockets. and he looked out across the road at the trees at the mountains rising blue-green in the late light. "My name is Hollis Buckley," he said. "Yes, sir." "I knew your grandfather Wyatt Mercer." The wind moved in the pines. "I knew him for 40 years. Wyatt couldn't speak. "He came in this store every Saturday morning for almost 20 years, Hollis said. Bought coffee, bought rope, bought lumber off and on for a long time, more lumber than a man uses for any one project. Bought batteries by the case. Bought rolled oats and dried beans and canned milk. He never said what for." The old man's hands were still in his pockets. He was still looking at the mountains. "The last time I saw him was in the summer of 2018. He came in for a sack of 16-penny nails and a tin of pipe tobacco. He paid in cash. He shook my hand at the door. He said, 'Hollis, if a young man named Wyatt ever comes in here and shows you a piece of paper, you do right by him.' And then he walked out, and I never saw him again. Heard he passed 2 months later." Hollis turned his head slowly and looked at Wyatt. His eyes were wet. "I've been waiting on you a long time, son." Wyatt's throat closed up so tight, he thought he was going to choke. He looked at Marin. Her eyes were huge. She had her hand on her mouth. "Sir," Wyatt said. He had to push the word out. "Do you know what's out there? At the X?" Hollis Buckley shook his head slowly. "I don't, son. He never told me. Whatever it is, it was between him and you. But I can tell you how to get there." He turned and pointed with one long, calloused finger. "You see that road? The one that drops off behind the post office? That's the old fire road. Used to lead up to the ridge. Nobody's been up that way in years. It's about a 3-mile walk to the property line. Your granddaddy owned 10 acres up on that ridge. The trust has been paying the taxes. I've been keeping an eye on it." "Yes, sir." "There's no house up there. No cabin. Just trees. Whatever he left you, it's somewhere on that ground." "Yes, sir." "Son." Hollis put a hand on his shoulder. The hand was heavy and warm. "It's getting on toward 5. You got maybe 3 hours of daylight. These mountains, they go dark fast. You sure you don't want to wait till morning?" Wyatt looked at the road that climbed up between the trees. He thought about the black sedan. "No, sir," he said. "I'd like to go now." The old man looked at him a long time. Then he nodded. "Wait here a minute." He went inside the store. Wyatt could hear him moving around. After a minute, he came back out with a paper sack. He pressed it into Wyatt's free hand. 2 flashlights, spare batteries, half a loaf of bread, jar of peanut butter, 4 bottles of water, a couple of apples. There's a folding knife in the bottom. I won't take your money. Don't argue with me, son. Your granddaddy paid for this 20 years ago." Wyatt could not get his voice to work. He nodded. "You go on now. You take care of your sister." And Wyatt, "Yes, sir." The old man's eyes were sharp. "If anybody comes around asking after you, anybody at all, I never seen you. You understand me?" Wyatt understood. "Yes, sir. Go on." They went. The fire road climbed steadily up out of the hollow behind the post office, a pair of overgrown ruts in the soft earth, choked with last year's leaves, and crossed in places by fallen branches that had to be stepped over. The trees closed in overhead. The light went greenish. The air smelled of wet wood and leaf mold, and something sharper underneath, something cold and clean. The smell of a country that had not been touched. They walked for an hour. The duffel bag on Wyatt's shoulder grew heavier with every step. The cardboard box was tucked inside it, now wrapped in his only spare shirt. Marin walked behind him in silence. Once she stumbled on a root, and he caught her arm without a word, and they kept going. The road forked. He took the map out. The fork wasn't on it. He looked at the cryptic notes, where the two streams weep. He stood very still and listened. Somewhere faintly off to the right, he could hear running water. "This way," he said. They left the road. The going was harder. They climbed over mossy boulders. They ducked under low pine branches. The slope got steep enough that Wyatt had to grab handfuls of laurel to keep from sliding back. Marin was breathing hard. Her face was pale. They came to a place where a small creek split into two smaller rivulets that ran down the hill in twin trickles, slow and steady like tears. Where the two streams weep. His grandfather had been a poet. They followed the main creek upstream. The terrain got rougher. The light got longer. The shadows stretched out across the forest floor, and the temperature began to drop in the way it drops in the mountains in early spring all at once, like a door closing. He looked at the map. Past the sleeping giant, he looked around. And then Marin grabbed his sleeve. "Wyatt!" He turned. She was pointing up the slope, maybe 60 feet away through the trees. There was a boulder, not a normal boulder. It was the size of a small house, gray granite covered in a thick green blanket of moss, and it lay on its side with one curved ridge along the top that looked in the slanting light exactly like a sleeping man's shoulder. The sleeping giant. Wyatt's pulse began to pound. He looked at the next clue. From the crooked pine 50 paces north. They climbed up to the giant. They circled it. And there, just beyond it, was a tree. It was a pine. An old one. It had been struck by lightning at some point in its long life. And it had not died, but it had grown back wrong. The trunk twisted into a permanent, agonized spiral 10 feet up before it tried to remember what straight was. The crooked pine. Wyatt took out the cheap compass from the bottom of Hollis Buckley's paper sack. He set it on a flat rock. He waited for the needle to settle. He pointed. "North is that way." They counted the paces together, aloud, their voices small in the great silence of the forest. 1, 2, 3. The light was going amber. The shadows were getting long. 20, 21, 22. A bird called somewhere far off and was answered by another. 48, 49, 50. They stopped. They were standing in a small clearing. A clearing of fallen pine needles and old leaves ringed by the dark trees no more than 15 feet across. It was perfectly ordinary. There was nothing in it. Nothing at all. Wyatt stood very still. Marin said, "Wyatt." He couldn't answer. He looked around the clearing. He looked at the trees. He looked at the ground. There was nothing here. Just dirt and pine needles and the long fingers of evening light coming down through the canopy in soft gold beams. He had been so sure. He had been so sure. He sank down to his knees in the pine needles. 12 hours on a bus. $63. A sister he had probably just thrown away the rest of her life to save. A black sedan in a Pittsburgh alley that maybe wasn't even there. A dead man's riddle that ended in an empty patch of forest. His hands were shaking. He hit the ground with his fist. Not hard, just once. His knuckles thudded against something that wasn't dirt. A dull metallic sound. He froze. He hit the ground again in a different spot. Soft. Just leaves. He hit it where he had hit it the first time. Thud. He ripped the pine needles aside with both hands. He scraped the loose dirt away. The dirt came up easy, the way dirt comes up that hasn't been packed down by years of rain. The way dirt comes up that someone laid loose on top of something on purpose. His fingernails scraped on metal. A sheet of steel, painted dark green, maybe 4 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide, hidden under 6 inches of soil and a careful blanket of forest floor. There was a rusted iron ring set into one end of it. A handle. Maren dropped to her knees beside him. Her breath was shallow. She didn't say anything. She just helped him scrape away the rest of the dirt. Both of them working with their hands. Their fingers raw, their shadows long across the clearing as the sun finally dropped behind the ridge and the light began to die. When the steel hatch was clear, Wyatt sat back on his heels. He looked at it. He took the heavy brass key out of his pocket. He looked at his sister. Her eyes were huge in her dirt-streaked face. She looked like a child. She looked like a woman. She looked like every brave thing he had ever seen. "Maren," he said. "Yeah. Whatever's down there. We're going down there together." "I know." He fitted the key to the lock that was set in the hatch. It turned. The hatch came up with a long, low groan, and the cool, dark breath of something underground rose up out of it into the dying light. And Wyatt Mercer, 18 years old, homeless 8 hours ago, knelt at the edge of his grandfather's secret with his sister beside him and a flashlight in his shaking hand. He clicked the flashlight on. Below the hatch, an iron ladder dropped straight down into the dark. He could not see the bottom. The wind moved in the high pines. Somewhere far below there was the soft, slow sound of something waiting. Wyatt swung his leg over the edge of the hatch, and he started down. The rungs of the ladder were cold under his hands. Wyatt went down slow. One rung at a time. The flashlight beam jumped around the walls of the shaft, and the walls of the shaft were not earth. They were concrete. Smooth gray, poured concrete with the marks of the wooden forms still visible in lines down the sides. Whoever had dug this hole had not dug it casually. Whoever had dug this hole had meant for it to last 100 years. The shaft was about 10 feet deep. His boots hit a concrete floor. He turned the flashlight in a slow circle. He was standing in a room. It was about 12 feet wide and 20 feet long, with a ceiling that he could touch with a raised hand. The walls were the same poured concrete as the shaft. The floor was sealed and clean. The air was cool and dry, and it smelled of nothing at all, no mildew, no rot. Just the faint mineral scent of stone, and the dry, papery scent of something that had been sealed up for a long time, and had been waiting. "Wyatt!" Maren called down from above. "It's all right," he called back. "Come on down. Slow." He held the flashlight up so she could see the rungs. Her sneakers came down through the hatch. He guided her to the floor. She let go of the ladder and turned, and her eyes went wide. Along the long wall to their right, floor to ceiling, was a row of metal shelving units bolted into the concrete. They were full, stacked with cardboard boxes labeled in his grandfather's careful block printing. Beans dried, milk powdered, flour, sugar, salt, rice. Below those were rows of mason jars, hundreds of them full of dark canned goods, the lids dusty but the seals still tight. Tomatoes, pickles, apples in syrup. Things a man would put up himself in a kitchen in autumn working alone. Below the jars were shelves of cans. Military issue. Bean soup, hash, peaches. The labels yellowed but the cans still solid. Below those were stacked plastic jugs of water lined up like soldiers. Along the other long wall were shelves of a different kind. Folded wool blankets. Cardboard boxes labeled first aid. boxes of batteries, coils of rope, 2 kerosene lanterns, 3 flashlights identical to the ones Hollis Buckley had given them, still in their plastic packaging, a small toolbox, an axe with a hickory handle, a canvas tarp folded into a tight square. It was a man's life work. It was a quiet man's quiet work done over years alone in the dark, on a piece of land that nobody had any reason to visit. Wyatt walked to one of the kerosene lanterns. He picked it up. The glass chimney was clean. He could smell the kerosene faintly through the cap. He shook it, half full. There was a tin of wooden matches on the shelf next to the lantern. His hands were shaking. He struck a match. The small flame jumped up. He lifted the chimney and touched the flame to the wick, and the wick caught, and the small yellow light bloomed and steadied. And Wyatt Mercer turned around in his grandfather's bunker, with a kerosene lantern in his hand, and looked at it the way a man looks at a thing he cannot understand. "Wyatt," Marin whispered. She was at the back wall. He went to her with the lantern. The back wall was not shelves. It was a workbench built into the concrete with a wooden top scarred from years of use. Above the bench, on a row of nails, hung tools, a hammer, a hand drill, a brace and bit, 2 screwdrivers a level. Below the bench was a small hand-crank generator, the kind a man might find in an old farmhouse, wired up to a battery box on the floor, and from there to a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling on a length of black cord. In front of the workbench against the back wall were 2 wooden cots, neat army cots with thin striped mattresses with a folded gray blanket on each. A cot for a man and another cot for a man, or for 2 children. 2 children whose grandfather had not known when they would come, but had known they would come. In the middle of the room was a small wooden table, a single chair pushed in under it, and on the table was a footlocker. It was olive drab metal with brass latches and a brass plate riveted to the lid. The plate had 2 words stamped into it: Mercer, Edgar. Marin sat down on one of the cots. She didn't say anything. She just sat with her hands in her lap and watched her brother walk slowly across the bunker to the footlocker. Wyatt set the lantern on the table. He put his hand on the lid of the footlocker. He opened it. The smell that came out was the smell of paper. Old paper and ink and something faintly resinous that might have been pipe tobacco. He held the lantern up. The footlocker was full of letters. Bundles of them, a dozen bundles or more, each tied with brown twine. The envelopes were all the same cream color as the map. The handwriting on every one was the same careful cursive. Every envelope said Wyatt on the front. Underneath the letters, set into a custom-fitted compartment, was a small black tape recorder, the kind that took the small cassettes. Beside it, in a plastic case, were a row of cassette tapes, each one labeled with a date in his grandfather's hand. The earliest was from the year Wyatt was born. The latest was from the summer before his grandfather died. Wyatt sat down in the chair. His knees would not hold him anymore. He picked up the topmost letter. It was separate from the bundles. It had no twine on it. It was sitting on top the way a man leaves something out on a desk for whoever comes next to find first. He opened it with the small folding knife from Hollis's bag. The paper inside was thick. The date at the top was September 4th, 2018. 2 months before his grandfather died. He held it close to the lantern and he read, "My dearest Wyatt, if you are reading this, then the world has failed you. In a way, I prayed every night that it would not. I am sorry for whatever has brought you to this place. I am sorrier than I can say. This room is not a home. You must understand that from the start. This room is a lifeboat. I built it because I could not save your father from himself, and because I could see long before he could see it that the storm was coming. And I could not save you from the storm if I tried to do it from the dry land. So I built you a boat. I built it with my own hands in my own time on the only piece of ground in this world that nobody could take from me. I prayed you would never need it. I prayed it would rot in the dirt and the moss would cover the door. And 100 years from now, some hunter would find it and wonder what fool had wasted his life building a hole in the ground. For nothing. That was my prayer. That prayer was not answered. You are reading this. So the storm came. I want you to know what I knew, son. You deserve to know it. There are things in this footlocker that will tell you more than I can fit in this letter. There are tapes. Listen to them in order. I made them across the years. You will hear my voice change. You will hear me get older. You will hear at the end a man who knows he is running out of days. Listen to all of them. Do not be afraid of the parts that hurt. The hurt is part of the inheritance. The land is yours. 10 acres in a trust in your name. The papers are with a lawyer in Charleston, whose name and address are in the bottom of this footlocker. Read those papers carefully when you are ready. You do not have to do anything with the land. You can stay down here as long as you need to. You can come up when you are ready. You can sell it. You can build on it. The choice is yours. I will not reach out of the grave to tell you what to do with what is yours. But I will tell you one thing, Wyatt. A lifeboat is not a home. A man who lives his life in a lifeboat has not survived. He is only delayed dying. Whatever you do it in the light of day. You hear me, son, in the light of day. Hiding is a thing you do until you are strong enough not to hide anymore. Then you stop. I love you. I loved you the first time I held you. When you were so small, I could fit your whole foot in my palm, and I have loved you every day since, even on the days I was not allowed to say it. I love your sister too. Tell her grandfather knew her. Tell her I knew. Stand fast, son. Edgar Mercer. Wyatt put the letter down on the table. He sat very still. He could hear Marin breathing soft and quiet on the cot behind him. He could hear the small hiss of the kerosene lantern. Outside, far above them, a wind was coming up through the high pines, and the wind made the tops of the pines move, and the moving of the pines made a soft, long sigh that came down through the open hatch and rolled through the concrete room like the breath of a sleeping animal. Wyatt put his face in his hands. He did not cry yet. The crying was not quite ready yet. The crying was building up in him slow like floodwater behind a dam, and he could feel the cracks starting to spread. But the dam was still holding, and he sat at his grandfather's table in the lantern light with his face in his hands, and he tried to breathe. Marin came over and stood beside him. She put her small hand on his shoulder. She did not say anything. She had always known when not to say anything. She had been born knowing it. After a long while, Wyatt lifted his face. "Marin," he said. "Yeah. There's a letter for you. He wrote a letter for you." She looked at the footlocker. "For me. He says he knew you. He says he knew us both." She sat down on the floor beside the chair. She leaned her shoulder against his leg, the way she used to when she was a much smaller girl, and they were sitting on a couch in a house that did not exist anymore. And a man and a woman who did not exist anymore were in the kitchen, in the next room arguing about money, and they did not know that their 2 children could hear every word. She did not cry either. She just leaned against him. "Read me one of the tapes," she said. "I want to hear his voice." He picked up the earliest cassette. The label said May 1st, 2014. His grandfather had started recording these 4 years before he died. 12 years ago, when Wyatt was 6, when Maren was 3. He fit the cassette into the recorder. He pressed play. There was a soft hiss, and then a voice. It was a voice Wyatt had not heard in 8 years. It was a voice he had thought was lost forever. It was a low, quiet voice with the soft drawl of a man who had been born in these mountains and never quite shaken it loose. "This is Edgar Mercer," the voice said. "Today is the 1st of May in the year 2014. I am sitting at my workbench in a hole in the ground that I started digging 11 months ago. The hole is finished now. The walls are poured. I built the forms myself. I poured the concrete in 3 sections. The roof went on last week. Today I sealed the hatch and brought my first load of supplies in. I am 68 years old. My back hurts in a place it didn't hurt last year. I do not know how long I have. I do not know how long any of us has. But I am going to start telling this story because somebody needs to hear it. And I cannot tell it to the person who needs to hear it most. So I will tell it to you, Wyatt. And I will hope that one day you find these tapes and you understand. Your father, my son, is in trouble. He has been in trouble for a long time, longer than your mother knows. Longer than you know, longer probably than even he knows. He owes money to a man in Pittsburgh who is not the kind of man you owe money to. The kind of man you do not walk away from. I tried to help him. I tried to pay it off. He would not let me. He is too proud. He has always been too proud. He gets that from me. It is the worst thing I ever gave him. I have decided to do this thing. To build this place. Because I can see what is coming and I cannot stop it from coming. But I can perhaps put a roof over your head and your sister's head when it comes. That is all I have left to give. I am sorry, son. I am so sorry. The tape hissed. Then there was a click. The recording ended. Wyatt sat in the silence. He did not move for a long time. Maren had her hand on his knee. He knew, she said quietly. Wyatt. He knew it was going to happen. Yes. He knew the whole time. Yes. She was quiet a moment longer. Then she said in a voice that was very steady for a 15-year-old girl in a concrete bunker in the West Virginia mountains. That's why he built it, wasn't it? He built it for us. Yes. For you and me. Yes. She put her head down against his leg. Then it was love, she said. All this, all these years, it was love. Wyatt put his hand on her hair. Yes, he said. I think it was. He played the tapes for hours. The lantern burned low and he refilled it from a tin can on the workbench. The sky through the open hatch went black, and the stars came out, and he could see them framed in the small square of opening above his head when he looked up. The world above was very quiet. The world below was full of his grandfather's voice. The voice on the tapes got older as the years went by. It got a little thinner, a little slower. The cough crept in around 2016 faint. At first, then more frequent. By the last tapes, the cough was bad. The cough was the cough of a man whose lungs were finishing with him. Edgar Mercer talked about a lot of things on those tapes. He talked about the weather. He talked about the price of lumber. He talked about a hawk he watched from a stump one afternoon hunting field mice in the brush below the ridge, and the patience of the hawk, and how a man could learn things from a hawk if he was willing to sit still long enough. He talked about Wyatt and Maren. It became clear over the hours that Edgar Mercer had been watching them. From a distance. He never said exactly how. He talked about driving up to Pittsburgh 4 times a year, parking 3 blocks from the house on Beechwood Street, walking down Beechwood with his cap pulled low just to look at the porch where his grandchildren lived, just to see the lights on in the windows. He talked about coming on a Saturday afternoon in October when Wyatt was 8 and seeing him in the side yard raking leaves and standing across the street behind the trunk of an oak tree for 40 minutes just watching him work. "I should have crossed the street," Edgar said on that tape. "I should have called his name. I should have introduced myself to him the way a grandfather ought to. I didn't. Your father had told me to stay away. He had told me what would happen if I didn't. And I was trying to honor that Wyatt. I was trying to honor my son even when my son was wrong. I have wondered every day since whether I was right to do that. I do not know the answer. Some questions a man does not get to know the answer to in his lifetime." There was a long pause on that tape, just the hiss of the recorder. And then Edgar's voice a little thicker. "If you ever have children, son, you go to them. Whatever else you do, you go to them." Wyatt had to stop the tape for a while after that one. He sat at the table in the lantern light, and Marin had fallen asleep on the cot, now curled up under the gray wool blanket, and he was alone with the small flame and the small voice on the tape and the great silent weight of the mountain above him. He thought about his grandfather standing across the street behind a tree, watching him rake leaves. He thought about a man making a 4-hour drive each way 4 times a year, just to stand for 40 minutes behind a tree. For 18 years, Wyatt Mercer had thought he had no family. For 18 years, he had thought nobody had been watching. He had been wrong. He played the next tape. Edgar talked on this one about Wyatt's father, about Reed Mercer, his son. Reed, Edgar said, had not been a bad boy. He had been a soft boy. A boy too easy in his wants. A boy who took the easy road every time the easy road and the right road forked. A boy who, when he became a man, found himself married to a woman he loved and a life he could not afford, and who decided that the way to fix that was to borrow money from the easy place instead of the hard place. The easy place was a man named Vance Calder. Wyatt sat up straight at the table. He had never heard the name in his life. But on the tape, his grandfather said it like a curse. Vance Calder, Edgar said, is the kind of evil that walks around in a clean shirt. He owns a pawn shop on East Carson Street, and he runs 3 crews out of an office in the back. He lends money to men who cannot get it anywhere else. He charges them rates a bank would go to jail for charging. And when they cannot pay, he takes things from them. Cars, tools, time. He takes their wives' wedding rings. He takes their fathers' pocket watches. He takes the deed to their houses. And when he has taken everything they have, he comes to their families. That is who your father owed money to Wyatt. $40,000 when he started. By the end, with the interest the way Calder calculates interest, it was something on the order of $200,000. Your father was never going to be able to pay that. He knew it. I knew it. Calder knew it. The tape clicked off. Wyatt fitted in the next one. "I want you to understand what happened to your father," Edgar said on the next tape. "Because I think one day you will be told, or you will figure out that he abandoned you and your sister and your mother. That is what it looked like. That is what your mother believed until the day I am told that she stopped believing anything at all. That is not what happened. Your father came to me the night before he disappeared. He came up the mountain in his old Ford truck, and he sat at my kitchen table, and he cried like a child. He said Calder had told him that if he did not have the money in 3 days, Calder was going to come to the house, to Beechwood Street, He was going to come for you, Wyatt. And for Marin. He was going to take you both and hold you somewhere until your father paid. Your father had no money. He had nothing. So I told him to run. I told him there was a bus station in Wheeling that did not check identification. I told him to take the cash I gave him, $4,000, all I could spare in cash, on a Tuesday night and go west and not stop and not call. Calder would come to the house. He would not find your father. He would find your mother. He would threaten her. But he would not in the end hurt a woman with 2 small children. Because Calder was a businessman, not a butcher. And dead bodies are bad for business. Calder would go away. The debt would get sold to somebody else somewhere. And over time it would be lost. That was the calculation. Your father went. I do not know where he went. He did not tell me. He was right not to tell me. If he had told me and Calder's people had ever come to me, I might have broken. A man is only as strong as his weakest day, and I have had weak days. Your mother did not know any of this. He could not tell her. If he had told her, she would have made him stay and Calder would have killed him, and you would have grown up burying your father, instead of just losing him. So he let her think the worst. He took the worst that any man can take from a wife. The belief that he was a coward in order to give her and you and your sister a future. It was the bravest thing he ever did, Wyatt. And nobody but me ever knew. Your mother, after he was gone, she fell apart. I expected that. I am sorry for it. She is not a strong woman, Wyatt. She never was. Some people are made for this world, and some people are not. Your mother was not. She did her best. Calder did come to the house. Twice. Your mother did not let him in. The second time, he stood on the porch and he told her things. I do not know what he told her. But after that night, your mother did not get out of bed for 3 weeks. After that, the bank took the house. After that, you and your sister went into the system. I tried to take you. Wyatt, I tried. I drove to Pittsburgh the week after the social services took you. And I sat in an office and I told a woman at a desk that I was your grandfather. And I wanted to file for custody of my grandchildren. She looked up your file. She came back. She said your father had filed paperwork before he disappeared declaring that I was not to have access to you under any circumstances. He had done it 3 years before. He had done it because he was already afraid of Calder then. He had done it to protect me. He had done it to keep Calder from looking up the family tree and finding a 66-year-old man on a piece of land in West Virginia with a small bank account and no family to fight back with. The paperwork was legal. The woman could not help me. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for a long time. Then I drove home. And I started building this place faster because I knew Wyatt. I knew you would come eventually. And I knew when you came, I would not be alive to meet you. I knew. It would have to be a thing I left behind. So I left it. I left everything I had. I left my whole life in this hole. I left it for you. I'm sorry I could not do more. I am sorry I could not do it in person. Stand fast, son. Stand fast. The tape clicked. Wyatt sat at the table. The lantern flame moved a little in some small current of air. He sat there for a very long time. Everything he had thought he knew about his life was wrong. His father had not abandoned him. His father had run because a man named Vance Calder was going to take Wyatt and his sister out of the house on Beechwood Street and use them as ransom. His mother had not collapsed because she was weak. His mother had collapsed because a man had stood on her porch and said things to her that she could not unhear. His grandfather had not been distant. His grandfather had been across the street behind a tree Watching his grandson rake leaves, the whole shape of his childhood reorganized itself in the lantern light. The arguments he had heard through the wall, the way his father had stopped sleeping in the year before he disappeared. The look on his mother's face the morning after a man had come to the porch the second time. The bruise Wyatt had seen on her wrist that he had been told came from closing the car door wrong. It had all been Calder. Calder had been the wind that blew his life apart, and Calder somewhere in Pittsburgh was almost certainly still alive. Calder was almost certainly still in business. Calder was almost certainly the reason a black sedan had sat in an alley outside a homeless shelter and watched the curtained window of a corner cot. Wyatt stood up from the table. The chair scraped on the concrete. He needed air. He needed sky. He needed the smell of the pines and the cold of the night, and something bigger than this little room. Marin did not wake up. He climbed the iron ladder slowly. He came up out of the hatch into the clearing, and he stood in the cold spring night. The moon was high. It was not full, but it was bright. The forest was washed in pale silver. The pines stood black against the silver sky. He could see his breath. He could hear an owl far off somewhere down the mountain. He walked to the edge of the clearing. He sank down to his knees in the pine needles. And then the dam broke. The crying came up out of him in long, ugly sounds that did not seem to belong to him. He cried for his father. He cried for the man he had spent 2 years hating and who had been all that time somewhere out west, alone eating the worst kind of life a man could eat in order to keep his children alive. He cried for his mother who had not been weak, who had been a woman trying to hold up a roof that 2 men had loaded with too much weight. He cried for his grandfather behind the oak tree on Beechwood Street, watching his grandson rake leaves not allowed to cross the road. He cried for himself. He cried for the boy he had been who had not known any of this, and who had spent 8 years carrying around a story about himself that wasn't true. The owl called again. He didn't know how long he had been on his knees. After a while, he heard footsteps in the pine needles behind him. Marin came and sat down beside him on the cold ground. She did not have a coat on, just her denim jacket. She had pulled the gray wool blanket from the cot around her shoulders. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "We still have each other." That was all. She did not try to make it better. She did not say it would be all right. She just put her hand on his back between his shoulder blades, where his coat was thin, and she sat with him on the ground in the moonlight. He let her. After a long time, he wiped his face with his sleeve. "Yeah," he said. His voice was raw. "Yeah, Marin, we do." They went back inside. He played one more tape that night. The last one. The label said August 14th, 2018. 3 months before his grandfather died. Edgar's voice was thin on this one. The cough was bad. "Wyatt," he said, "I am about done here. I want to tell you about the can in the ground. From the crooked pine you face the sleeping giant. From the giant you walk 20 paces. There is a flat gray stone there lying in the dirt. It is bigger than the other stones around it. It does not match. I put it there myself. Beneath that stone 2 feet down is an Army surplus ammunition can, the watertight kind sealed with rubber. Inside the can is everything I had left at the end. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to start something. That is for you, Wyatt. That is for you and your sister. You use it to get clear of all of this. You hear me. You use it to build something in the light. And in the bottom of the locker you will find a leather-bound notebook. It looks like an ordinary ledger. Don't lose it, son. I worked on that for 15 years. Everything I ever found out about Vance Calder I wrote in that book. Names, dates, bank accounts, photographs taped to the pages. The names of 3 men he hurt and 1 man he killed. A copy of all of it is with a lawyer named Atticus Vaughn in Charleston. His address is in the book. If Calder ever comes near you, if Calder ever sends one of his men, you take that book to Vaughn and Vaughn will know what to do. Do not use it lightly. Do not use it for revenge. Use it only to be left alone. Do you hear me? You use it to be left alone. Stand fast. I love you. The tape clicked off. Wyatt sat at the table. He looked over at the footlocker. He reached down and felt along the inside of the bottom panel. There was a small wooden pull, almost invisible. He pulled it. The whole bottom panel came up. Underneath was a leather-bound notebook, dark brown, well-worn. Beside it was an envelope, thick with something. He took the envelope first. He opened it. It was a sheaf of legal documents. The land trust, the deed, the contact information for the lawyer in Charleston, Atticus Vaughn, attorney at law, a phone number and an address. He took out the notebook. He opened it to a page at random. It was full of his grandfather's careful printing, dates, dollar amounts, names of men in Pittsburgh he had never heard of, newspaper clippings taped to the facing pages, articles from the Post-Gazette about a robbery here, a beating there, a body found in the Monongahela, notes in the margins. VC ordered. Per source, RM. A small black and white photograph taped to one page showed a heavy-set man in a wool overcoat coming out of a building on a city street, half-turned, glaring at the camera. The face was hard. The eyes were small and dark. The handwritten caption under the photograph said, Vance Calder, East Carson Street. August 12, 2017. Wyatt closed the notebook. He closed it slowly. He held it in both hands for a long time. The leather was warm from his hands. He thought about his grandfather sitting alone at this table in this lantern light, 15 years of evenings writing in this book. Driving up to Pittsburgh alone, an old man taking photographs of a dangerous man through a long lens from across a street. Cutting articles out of newspapers, building page by patient page a record that nobody else in the world knew existed. His grandfather had not been preparing to hide. His grandfather had been preparing to fight, just not while he was still alive. Wyatt set the notebook back in the false bottom of the footlocker. He set the envelope of legal papers beside it. He closed the lid. Then he found the small folded piece of paper Edgar had described, and he climbed back up the ladder with the lantern, and he and Marin walked the 20 paces from the crooked pine to where a flat gray stone lay among rounder, darker stones in a slope of pine needles. It took both of them and the small folding shovel from the toolbox to pry it up. 2 feet down in the soft, cold earth was the can. It was olive drab, about the size of a small lunchbox, heavier than it looked. The latch was rusted, but the rubber gasket was still good. He brushed the dirt off the lid. He carried it back to the bunker like something fragile. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was money. Banded stacks of $100 bills. He didn't count it. He didn't want to count it. He just looked at it for a moment. A long moment. Then he closed the can again. He set it on the workbench. He looked at his sister. Marin was sitting on the cot. She was watching him. Wyatt, she said. Yeah. What does it mean? All of this. He sat down on the other cot across from her. The lantern was between them on the table. The light moved gently on the concrete walls. It means, he said, that we are not as alone as we thought we were. It means we get to start over. Yes. It means we get to live. Yes. She nodded. She leaned back against the wall. She closed her eyes. After a few minutes, her breathing went deep and slow, and she was asleep again. Wyatt sat with the lantern. He thought for a long time about his grandfather's last instruction. Use it to be left alone. He understood it. He understood it now. A man with a notebook like that one was a man who could fight. But a man who fought a man like Vance Calder did not always come home. His grandfather had not built a bunker for a war. His grandfather had built a bunker for a peace. The notebook was the price of that peace. It was a knife to hold to the throat of an enemy who was coming for you, and the thread of the knife was meant to make the enemy turn around. Stand fast, and let the world come to you. And when it comes, show it that you are not the easy mark. It thinks you are. He closed his hand around the small folded note in his pocket. The note about the stone, the can, the money. The phone in his other pocket buzzed. The phone was the burner. The little black flip phone he had found still in its wrapper, tucked behind the cassettes in the footlocker. He had taken it out earlier and put a battery in it and turned it on just to see if it would work, and he had tucked it in his pocket and forgotten it. There was only one number in its memory. The number he had called once that afternoon to leave a brief, careful voicemail at Buckley's General Store. Just to say they had made it. Just to thank Hollis for the food. Hollis had asked him to call. Hollis had said, "If you make it, you let me know, son. And here is my number if I ever need to call you back." The phone buzzed a second time. It was Hollis. Wyatt opened the phone. He pressed the green button. "Sir, Wyatt." Hollis's voice was very quiet, very even. The kind of even a man uses when he does not want the sound of his own voice to carry. "Are you somewhere safe?" "Yes, sir." "Listen to me carefully, son. I am at the store. I just locked up. A man came in here about 40 minutes ago. Tall man. Heavy. Wool overcoat expensive. He had a young one with him, 20s, mean looking. They drove up in a black Cadillac with Pennsylvania plates." Wyatt's mouth went dry. "They asked me," Hollis said, "if I had seen two kids come through Northwood. A boy of 18 and a girl of 15. Brother and sister. From Pittsburgh. He said the boy's name." "What did he say?" "He said your name, son. He said Wyatt Mercer. He said it like he had said it before." The lantern flame moved. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I had not seen anybody in 3 days but the propane man and a fellow from the highway department. I told him this was a small place, and people who came through I would have noticed." He looked at me a long time. He said, "You sure about that, old man?" I said, "I am sure as a sundown mister." He looked at me a while longer. Then he and the young one got back in the Cadillac and they drove off east on Route 28. That was 20 minutes ago. Wyatt sat down on the cot. He left me a card, Wyatt. He said, "If your memory comes back, you call this number, and there's $1,000 in it for you." The card has no name on it, just a number with a Pittsburgh area code. Hollis paused. "Wyatt?" He looked like a man who knows what he wants and is willing to pay to get it. That ain't the kind of man who comes through here for nothing. He was wearing a class ring on his right hand. Big gold thing. Letters worn down. But I could read enough of them to know it was St. Vincent College. Class of 1978. Wyatt closed his eyes. He saw in his mind the face from the small black and white photograph in his grandfather's notebook. The hard face, the small dark eyes, the wool overcoat. Vance Calder. 8 hours from Pittsburgh, in Northwood, West Virginia. Asking after Wyatt Mercer by name. "Sir," he said. "Yes, son? Is there any chance he saw which way we went today?" There was a pause. "Wyatt," Hollis said. "I've been thinking about that. A young couple was filling up at the pump when you came through this afternoon. They were from out of state. Massachusetts plates. They might have noticed 2 kids walking up the fire road. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but if Calder offers them $1,000, who knows what they remember." The lantern hissed. "He'll come back, son. Tomorrow, the day after sometime. He is the kind of man who comes back. You hear me?" "Yes, sir. You stay where you are tonight, both of you. Stay underground. Stay quiet. I'm going to drive up tomorrow morning at first light. I'm going to bring you what I think you need. And then we are going to talk about what comes next." "Yes, sir." "Wyatt." "Yes, sir. You stand fast, son." Wyatt's eyes filled. "Yes, sir." He closed the phone. He sat very still in the lantern light. Across the room, Marin was sleeping under the gray blanket. Her breathing was slow and even. She did not know yet. She did not know that the storm her grandfather had built this place to weather had not blown out all those years ago when Reed Mercer disappeared into the west. The storm had circled back. The storm had a name. The storm was 8 hours away in a black Cadillac, and the storm had read enough of the old man's face in the general store to know that the old man was lying. The storm was coming. Wyatt stood up. He walked to the foot of the iron ladder. He climbed up to the hatch. He pulled the heavy steel cover closed over his head. He turned the wheel that locked it from the inside until it would not turn anymore. He came back down. He sat at his grandfather's table. He put his hand on the leather-bound notebook. He thought about the lifeboat. He thought about a quiet old man building a fortress in the mountains for 15 years alone and dying without knowing if it would ever be used. He thought about a stone in the dirt with a can underneath it. He thought about a name, Atticus Vaughn, Charleston, attorney at law. The lantern burned low. Outside, the wind in the high pines made its long, slow sigh, and the moon crossed the sky, and somewhere out on Route 28, a black Cadillac went on east into the dark, with the headlights cutting 2 yellow tunnels through the night. Wyatt Mercer sat at his grandfather's table, and he started to plan. The morning came up cold and clear. Wyatt did not sleep. He sat at the table through the long hours of the dark, and he listened to Marin breathe, and he listened to the small sounds of the bunker. The tick of cooling concrete, the soft settle of the kerosene lantern as the wick burned down. He was thinking. He was thinking the way his grandfather had told him to think on the very first tape. Slow, patient, like a hawk on a stump, waiting on a field mouse to break cover. A man like Vance Calder was a man who came at you with money and with violence in that order. The money was the first move. The $1,000 on the card. Calder was buying memory. He was buying small-town memory, which was usually for sale, and he was waiting to see who would not sell it. The ones who would not sell it were the ones he came back for next. Hollis Buckley was not going to sell, which meant Hollis Buckley was the next problem on Calder's list. Wyatt could not let that be true. He picked up the leather notebook from the table. He held it on his lap. He opened it to the page where the lawyer's name was written in the front cover, in his grandfather's careful hand. Atticus Vaughn, attorney at law, 412 Quarrier Street, Charleston, West Virginia. Office line 304-555-0184. Below the address, his grandfather had written one sentence: "If the wolf comes, take this book to him." Wyatt closed the notebook. He understood now what his grandfather had meant on the last tape. Use it to be left alone. Edgar Mercer had not built a weapon for revenge. He had built a weapon to make the wolf turn around and walk away from a door it had been planning to come through. The notebook was a fence made of evidence. You did not climb a fence like that. You went around. Calder would not want to be around. Calder did business by quiet. Calder owned a pawn shop and ran his crews from a back office and clipped articles out of the Post-Gazette to keep track of the men he had hurt. Calder did not want a notebook full of his own crimes sitting on a desk in Charleston in the office of a lawyer. Calder had never heard of in the hands of an old hill country attorney who had been waiting on a young man named Wyatt Mercer for 8 years. Calder would walk away from that fence if the fence was real, if the fence was already up. Wyatt looked at the small folded paper that had Atticus Vaughn's number on it. He had to make a call. The call had to happen this morning, before Calder came back, before Hollis Buckley got hurt. He put the notebook on the table. He waited for the dawn. Hollis came up the fire road just after first light. Wyatt heard the engine before he saw the truck. He climbed the ladder and pushed the hatch up an inch and watched through the sliver of light. An old green Ford F-100 was crawling up the rut's low gear, the suspension rocking over the roots. Hollis was at the wheel. He was alone. Wyatt opened the hatch. He climbed up. He stood at the edge of the clearing in the cold gold light of the morning. The air smelled of pine and frost and the iron tang of high mountain water. The ground was hard with the night's freeze. The truck stopped at the edge of the clearing. Hollis got out. He had on the same flannel and the same canvas pants from the day before, but he had added a wool coat and a brown felt hat with a sweat-stained band. He carried a paper sack in one hand and a thermos in the other. He stopped when he saw Wyatt, and he looked him over slow the way an old man looks at another man's eyes when he wants to know what is going on inside. He saw what he wanted to see. He nodded once. "You been up all night?" "Yes, sir." "Figured." He held up the thermos. "Coffee, hot. Sandwiches in the bag. Egg and bacon. Took 'em off the griddle 10 minutes ago." He came over to the hatch. He looked down into it. He let out a long breath through his nose. "I'll be damned," he said, quiet, to himself. He really did it. Wyatt watched him. "You knew he was building something." "I knew he was buying lumber for nothing," Hollis said. "I knew he was buying batteries by the case for nothing. I knew he never let me come up on this ridge with him, not once in 20 years. I knew when he walked out of my store that last summer that he had finished a thing. I never asked what." He looked at Wyatt. "That was your granddaddy's way. He told what he meant for you to know. He didn't tell what he didn't." "Yes, sir." Hollis set the thermos and the bag on the hood of his truck. "Sit," he said. "Eat. We got things to talk about." Wyatt sat on the running board of the truck. Marin came up out of the hatch, blinking in the light, and Hollis turned around at the sound of her, and his face went soft in a way Wyatt had not seen on it before. "Morning, miss." "Morning, sir. I got a sandwich for you." "Thank you." She took it. She sat down on the running board next to her brother. They ate in silence for a while. The coffee was strong and good, and it burned the cold out of Wyatt's chest. The sun came up another inch over the eastern ridge and lit the clearing in long bars of pale light. Hollis leaned against the truck. He took a folded piece of paper out of his coat pocket. "Calder didn't go far," he said. "He took a room at the Mountain View Motel down in Elkins last night. I called over there at 6 this morning. The lady at the desk owes me a favor. He's still checked in. Him and the young one. They had breakfast at the diner across the road at 7. They are still there now, far as she knew. Wyatt looked at him. You called the motel. I called the motel. Sir, you didn't have to. Son, Hollis's eyes were very steady. Your granddaddy stood by me in the winter of '79 when I had a sick wife and no money for the propane bill. He paid the bill. He never told me he paid it. I found out 4 years later from his cousin. He was a man who paid bills that weren't his. I've been waiting for 30 years to pay one back. Don't tell me what I had to do. Wyatt looked at the ground. Yes, sir. Now, Hollis unfolded his piece of paper. Calder is going to drive back up here. Today, tomorrow, the next day. I cannot tell you when. I can tell you he is going to. Question is, what do we want him to find when he gets here? Wyatt set his coffee down on the running board. He stood up. He looked at Hollis Buckley in the morning light, and he heard somewhere in the back of his head his grandfather's voice on the last tape. Use it to be left alone. Sir, he said, I need to make a call to a lawyer in Charleston this morning, before he comes back. Hollis's eyes sharpened. What lawyer? His name is Atticus Vaughn. My grandfather left him papers a long time ago about Calder. Hollis was silent a moment. Then he said very slowly, Wyatt, are you telling me that your granddaddy? Yes, sir. That cantankerous old man? Yes, sir. That he sat up in this mountain for 15 years building a case against Vance Calder? Yes, sir. He kept a notebook. I have it. There's a copy with the lawyer. Hollis took his hat off. He held it in both hands. He looked up at the trees. Lord Almighty, he said. I underestimated that man. Sir, I need to call from somewhere safe. Calder might have a way to track the burner. I don't know how those things work. He don't have a way, Hollis said. Burner is a burner. But you don't make this call from up here anyway. You make it from my back office at the store. The line's been there 40 years. It is a regular landline. Nobody can do nothing to a regular landline. He put his hat back on. Get your sister. Get your notebook. Get whatever else you need. We are going down to the store. Wyatt looked at Marin. She was already standing. The drive down the mountain took 20 minutes. Marin sat in the middle of the bench seat. The leather notebook was in Wyatt's lap, wrapped in the oilcloth from the ammunition can. The truck rocked over the ruts, and Hollis drove one-handed, his other hand on the gear shift. His eyes flicking now and then to the rear-view mirror, the way a man drives when he has spent a lifetime making sure nothing was behind him, that he didn't want behind him. The store was empty when they pulled up. Hollis unlocked the back door. He took them through a small storeroom that smelled of feed sacks and motor oil into a back office with a roll-top desk and a kerosene heater, and one black rotary phone sitting on a stack of yellowed receipts. There, Hollis said. She's slow, but she is honest. Wyatt sat down at the desk. He took out the small folded paper with Atticus Vaughn's number on it. He set it next to the phone. He looked at his sister. Marin was leaning against the doorframe. She nodded at him once. He picked up the receiver. He dialed. The phone rang 3 times. A woman's voice answered. Older. Soft. The voice of someone who had been answering this phone for 30 years. Vaughn Law Office. Ma'am, Wyatt said. My name is Wyatt Mercer. My grandfather was Edgar Mercer. There was a pause on the line, a long pause. Then the woman said, Hold the line, son. He heard her set the phone down on a wooden surface. He heard her footsteps walking away. He heard faintly a man's voice in another room. He heard her footsteps come back, faster now. "Mr. Mercer, the senior partner is going to take this call in his office. One moment." Click. The line shifted. A new voice came on. A man's voice. Old. Dry. The kind of voice that had been used for a lot of years to say careful things in courtrooms and to read careful things to nervous people across desks. "Wyatt," the voice said, "it is good to hear from you, son. My name is Atticus Vaughn. I have been your grandfather's attorney for 31 years. I've been waiting for this call since November of 2018. Wyatt could not speak for a second. "Yes, sir." "You have his notebook?" "Yes, sir." "Tell me you have not lost it." "I have it, sir. I have it right here." "Then we have not lost time, son. Tell me where you are." Wyatt told him. Northwood. Buckley's store. He told him about Calder coming through yesterday afternoon. He told him about the man at the motel in Elkins. Atticus Vaughn listened without interrupting. When Wyatt was done, the old lawyer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All right. Listen to me, son. I'm going to do 3 things this morning. First, I'm going to put your grandfather's case file on my desk. It has been in a fireproof cabinet in my back room for the last 15 years. There are sealed copies of every document in that notebook of yours. There are affidavits from witnesses your grandfather found, including one man who is in protective custody in Erie, Pennsylvania, who can put Vance Calder at the scene of an aggravated assault in 2012. There is a copy of a federal probation officer's report from 2006. There are bank records that no civilian should have been able to obtain, and I am going to be very polite to a federal prosecutor when I am asked how Edgar Mercer obtained them. There is a great deal of paper in this file, son. Your grandfather was a thorough man." "Yes, sir." "Second, I'm going to call a friend of mine in the United States Attorney's Office in Pittsburgh. I am going to tell her off the record that I am sitting on a delivery for her that she has been waiting on for a long time. She has been trying to build a RICO case against Vance Calder since 2015, and she has not had what she needs. Today she is going to have what she needs. She is going to be in a very good mood by the end of the morning." "Yes, sir." Third, the most important. I'm going to send my paralegal to drive a sealed envelope to Mr. Buckley's general store. It will reach you by this evening. The envelope will contain a single letter on my firm's stationery with my signature and seal. The letter will be addressed to Vance Calder. It will state that I am the executor of the Mercer Family Trust, that I have received certain materials of an evidentiary nature concerning Mr. Calder's business activities, that those materials are in the hands of federal authorities as of today's date, and that any contact, direct or indirect, between Mr. Calder or his associates and any member of the Mercer family will be considered by this office to be a deliberate act of witness intimidation. I will copy the United States Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania on this letter." Wyatt was holding the receiver in both hands. He could not speak. "Wyatt," the lawyer said. "Yes, sir. When Mr. Calder comes back to that store, son, you will hand him this letter. You will not say much. There is not much to say. The letter does the work. He will read it. He will understand it. He has been a careful man for 40 years. He is not a careful man because he is brave. He is a careful man because he is afraid of going to prison. Today is the day he is going to be reminded of what he is afraid of." "Yes, sir." "Are you afraid, son?" Wyatt looked at the leather notebook in his lap. "Yes, sir, I am." "Good," Atticus Vaughn said. "That means you are paying attention. Now you stand fast. You hear me. You stand fast." The lawyer hung up. Wyatt set the receiver down slow. He sat at the desk a long minute. Then he turned and looked at Hollis and Marin in the doorway. "He is on our side, sir," he said quietly. Hollis nodded. "I expect he is, son. I expect he has been on your side a long time." The envelope arrived at 4 in the afternoon. A young woman in a gray sedan with Charleston plates pulled up to the gas pump. She came inside. She did not say much. She handed Hollis a manila envelope sealed with red wax. She drank a cup of coffee at the counter. She got back in her car and drove south. Hollis brought the envelope to the back office. Wyatt opened it. There was one letter inside. 3 pages. Cream-colored stationery with Atticus Vaughn, attorney at law, embossed at the top in dark green. The text of the letter was exactly what the old lawyer had said it would be. At the bottom was Vaughn's signature, the firm's gold seal, and a list of carbon copies that included the United States Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania, the special agent in charge of the FBI's Pittsburgh field office, and the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. It was 3 pages of plain language and quiet menace. It was also an act of love. It was a lawyer who had waited 15 years to do this for an old client. Wyatt folded the letter back into its envelope. He set it on the counter at the front of the store. He sat down on a stool by the register. He waited. The Cadillac came up the road at 5:43. Wyatt heard it before he saw it. The engine was big and smooth, and it did not sound like any other vehicle that came through by Northwood. Hollis stood up from his rocking chair on the porch. He did not go inside. He stayed on the porch. He had a shotgun leaning against the wall behind him just inside the door, but he did not pick it up. Marin was in the back office with the door closed. Wyatt stood up from the stool. He walked to the door of the store. He opened it. He stepped out onto the porch, and he stood beside Hollis, the manila envelope in his right hand. The Cadillac stopped in the gravel lot. 2 men got out. The driver was the young one, 20s, a black suit, a face that looked like it had been hit a few times and had decided to start hitting back early. He kept his hands loose at his sides. The passenger was Vance Calder. He was bigger than Wyatt had expected, 6'2", maybe taller. Heavy through the chest the way men get heavy when they have been strong all their lives and have started to soften but not enough to slow down. He wore a black wool overcoat over a charcoal suit, a red tie. His hair was iron gray, cut close. His face was the face from his grandfather's photograph 8 years older. The small, dark eyes flat and patient. He had a class ring on his right hand. He walked across the gravel without any hurry. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked at Hollis. He looked at Wyatt. His eyes went to Wyatt's face, and they stayed there a long moment. "Wyatt Mercer," he said. His voice was soft, the voice of a man who had not had to raise it in 20 years. "Yes, sir." "You favor your father." Wyatt did not answer that. Calder put his hands in the pockets of his overcoat. He looked at the storefront. He looked up at the sky, where the light was getting long and gold over the ridge. He looked back at Wyatt. "I would like to have a conversation with you, son." "All right. Just you and me. Mr. Buckley stays." Calder's eyes moved to Hollis. Hollis looked back at him. Hollis did not move. After a moment, Calder smiled. It was a small smile, the smile of a man who had decided that this was not the hill. "All right," Calder said. "Mr. Buckley stays." The young one in the suit stayed by the Cadillac. Calder came up the porch steps. Slow. He stopped on the top step. He did not come up onto the porch itself. He stayed below Wyatt and Hollis, which Wyatt understood was a thing a careful man did when he wanted to look like he was not crowding you even though everything else about him crowded you. Your father, Calder said, owes me a substantial sum of money, son. I am sure you know that by now. The debt is older than you are in terms of the original principal. With interest, it has grown. It is a considerable obligation. Yes, sir. I am a businessman, Wyatt. I am not an unreasonable man. I understand that the children are not the parents. I understand that you and your sister are not your father, and that you did not sign the papers that he signed. But the obligation is to the family. That is how the loan was structured. The family is the collateral. Do you understand me, son? I understand you, sir. Good. Calder nodded. Then we can have a reasonable conversation. I am prepared to consider the matter closed for the sum of $150,000 paid in cash within 30 days. That is a substantial discount on the actual obligation. I am offering it to you in recognition of the difficulty of your situation. If you accept this offer, son, you and your sister will not see me or any associate of mine ever again. You have my word. He waited. Wyatt looked at him. The sun was a hand's width above the ridge now. The shadows were getting long across the gravel. Somewhere, a long way off, a crow was calling. Wyatt thought about a man across the street behind an oak tree, watching a small boy rake leaves. Mr. Calder, he said. Yes, son. My grandfather knew about you. Calder went still. It was a small stillness. It was the stillness of an animal that hears a sound it did not expect. My grandfather, Wyatt said, was a man named Edgar Mercer. He died 8 years ago. Before he died, he kept a notebook. For 15 years, I have it now. Inside it are bank records, photographs, newspaper clippings, a copy of a federal probation officer's report on you from 2006, the names of 3 men you hurt and 1 man you killed, a signed affidavit from a witness who can put you at the scene of an aggravated assault in Pittsburgh in 2012. The witness is currently in protective custody in Erie, Pennsylvania. Calder did not move. This is a copy of a letter from my grandfather's attorney, Wyatt said. His name is Atticus Vaughn. He has been my grandfather's attorney for 31 years. He has had a sealed copy of every document I just mentioned in his office in Charleston since 2010. As of this morning, he has put those documents in the hands of the United States Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. The investigation against you that began in 2015 has, as of today, what it needs to proceed. He held the envelope out. This is for you, sir. Calder did not take it. Calder looked at the envelope. He looked at Wyatt's face. He looked at Hollis Buckley, who had not moved from his place beside the porch column. The wind moved in the pines on the far side of the road. Calder reached out. He took the envelope. He opened it. He read the letter standing on the second-to-top step of Hollis Buckley's porch in the long gold light of a West Virginia afternoon. Wyatt watched his face. Calder's face did not change much. It did not have to. The flatness in the small, dark eyes deepened slow, the way the surface of a still pond deepens when something underneath it moves. He read all 3 pages. He folded the letter. He put it back in the envelope. He held the envelope in his left hand. He looked up at Wyatt. Edgar Mercer, he said softly. Yes, sir. Calder shook his head slow just once. Then he laughed. It was a small, dry laugh. A single sound, not amusement, but something else. The sound of a man acknowledging a hand he had not known his opponent was holding. I met him once, Calder said. Did you know that? I met him once in 1996. He came to my office in the back of the shop. He sat down across from my desk. He said his name was Edgar Mercer and his son was Reed Mercer. and he wanted to talk about his son's situation. I was not at that time the man I am now. I was younger. I was less patient. I told him to leave. I told him if I ever saw him again, it would not go well for him. He looked at the envelope in his hand. He left. He did not come back. No, sir. He went and built this instead. Yes, sir. Calder stood on the second step a long moment. Your grandfather, he said, was a more dangerous man than I knew. Yes, sir. He was. Calder nodded. He took a slow breath. He looked at Wyatt for the last time. Son, he said, you will not see me again. You have my word on that. Whatever your grandfather built into this thing, whatever Mr. Vaughn has put in motion this morning, I expect to spend the next several years dealing with it. I do not have time in those years for an 18-year-old boy in West Virginia. The debt is closed. Tell your sister. Yes, sir. And son. Yes, sir. Your father, Calder said. He went west, son, not east. The bus station in Wheeling, November of 2023. I was there. I watched him get on the bus. I did not stop him. He thinks I never knew. He has been hiding for 8 years from a man who let him go on the second night. You can tell him that if you ever find him. You can tell him Vance Calder said the debt was paid the day he got on that bus. He turned. He walked down the porch steps. He walked back across the gravel to the Cadillac. The young one opened the passenger door for him. Calder got in. The door closed. The Cadillac started. It backed out of the gravel lot in a wide, slow arc. It pulled out onto Route 28. It headed east toward Elkins, toward the highway, toward Pennsylvania, toward whatever was coming for Vance Calder next. The taillights went around the bend. The sound of the engine faded. The crow called again somewhere down the hollow. Wyatt stood on the porch. He could not feel his legs. Hollis Buckley reached out and put his hand on Wyatt's shoulder. Son, he said, you can sit down now. Wyatt sat down. He sat down right there on the porch boards, his back against the post, and Hollis sat down beside him on the steps. And the two of them did not speak for a long time. Inside the store, the back office door opened. Marin came out. She walked through the store and out onto the porch, and she sat down on the other side of her brother, and she put her arms around him. The sun went down behind the ridge. The light went purple and then blue and then black, and the first stars came out, and somewhere up in the high country, an owl began to call. And Wyatt Mercer sat on the porch of Buckley's General Store in the cooling spring night, with his sister against his shoulder, and an old man on the steps below him. And he understood for the first time in his life what his grandfather had meant on the very first tape. Stand fast. It did not mean fight. It did not mean run. It meant be the kind of man who is prepared. Be the kind of man who has done the slow, patient work in private over years, so that when the wolf comes, you do not have to be brave. You only have to open the door and show the wolf what you have ready, and the wolf will turn around and walk back to the dark. Edgar Mercer had stood fast for 15 years in a hole in the ground. His grandson on a porch in the mountains finally understood why. The next morning, Hollis brought him one more envelope. It was small, plain, yellow with age. It had no name on the outside. Hollis brought it out from a metal box in the back of the storeroom, a box that had been sitting on the top shelf for 8 years behind a row of paint cans, where Hollis had put it the day he had come back from Edgar Mercer's funeral. He set it on the counter. Your granddaddy gave this to me at his last visit, he said. He said if a young man named Wyatt ever comes here and shows you the map, you give him the map's instructions and you keep your mouth shut. After it is all over, after the wolf is gone, then you give him this." Those were his exact words, son. I have kept them. Wyatt picked up the envelope. He turned it over. There was nothing on the back. He opened it. There was a single sheet of cream paper inside, folded once. His grandfather's handwriting. Wyatt, if you are reading this letter, then it is over. Whatever was coming, it has come, and you are still standing. I am proud of you, son. I have been proud of you since the day you were born. I am proud of you now. There is one more thing I have to tell you. I have not told it on any of the tapes. I have not put it in the notebook. I have kept it for last because it was not mine to give, and I was not sure until the very end whether to give it at all. Your father wrote to me once. In May of 2017, a letter came to my post office box with no return address. The postmark was Bozeman, Montana. The letter was 3 pages. He did not tell me where he was living. He did not give me an address. He told me he was alive. He told me he was sober. He told me he had been working as a wildland firefighter for 2 seasons, and that he was going to keep working, and that he was saving every dollar that did not go to food. He told me he was sorry. He told me he loved his children. He told me that one day when it was safe, he would come home. I never wrote him back, Wyatt. I did not know how. I did not know what to say to a son I had been mourning for 9 years, and who was it turned out alive in Montana. I was 68 years old. I was tired. I was sick. I was already 2 years into the bunker. I told myself I would write to him next month. I told myself I would write to him at Christmas. I told myself I would write to him when I had figured out what to say. I died without writing to him. That is my single greatest regret, son. Of all the things I did and did not do in my life, that is the one I would take back if I could. I am telling you this because you have a choice now that I did not give myself. Your father may still be in Bozeman. He may not. He may be alive. He may not. The post office box he had 8 years ago may still be there. It may not. I do not know. I have not tried to find out. The address is below. You do not have to write to him. You do not have to do anything. You have already done more than any 18-year-old man should ever have to do. You have saved your sister. You have closed a debt my son could not close. You have stood fast. But if you choose to write him, son, if you choose to send a letter to that post office box, just to see if anyone is still picking up the mail, I want you to know that you would not be doing it alone. I would be at your shoulder. I would be at your shoulder for the rest of your life. Do not make my mistake, Wyatt. Do not wait until next month. Stand fast. And when you are ready, reach out. I love you. Edgar. Below the letter in his grandfather's careful printing was an address. P.O. Box 417, Bozeman, Montana 59715. Wyatt sat down on the stool by the register. He held the letter in both hands. The store was quiet around him. After a long time, Marin came over and stood beside him. She read the letter over his shoulder. She did not say anything. When she was done, she put her hand on the back of her brother's neck, and she leaned her forehead against the top of his head. And the two of them stayed like that for a long time. Outside, the morning light came up through the pines. Spring came. Atticus Vaughn drove up from Charleston in the second week of May. He brought paperwork with him. A petition for guardianship, affidavits, a motion to consolidate the state's juvenile case file with the trust documents. He had filed it all in Kanawha County the week before. The hearing was set for the 1st of June. Wyatt drove down to Charleston for the hearing in Hollis Buckley's truck. Marin rode in the middle of the seat. Hollis drove. Atticus Vaughn met them at the courthouse in a gray suit that was older than Wyatt was. He had a soft handshake and very kind eyes behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. The judge was a heavy, white-haired woman named Mavis Henderson. She read the petition. She read the trust documents. She read the affidavit from Eleanor Whitmore, the social worker from Pittsburgh, who had been quietly working with Atticus for 3 weeks on the Mercer file. Eleanor had driven down for the hearing on her own time. She sat in the back of the courtroom in a plain blue dress. The judge looked at Wyatt over her glasses. "Son," she said, "is this something you want?" "Yes, ma'am." "Is this something you can do?" "You are 18 years old. You have 10 acres of land, and what I am told is a very modest but stable income from a family trust. You have no high school diploma yet. You have a sister who is 15 years old. Do you understand what you are asking this court for?" "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "Tell me what you understand." Wyatt thought about it. He thought about the small, concrete room. He thought about a man on his knees in the pine needles. He thought about a porch in Northwood. "Ma'am," he said, "I understand that I am asking the court to let me be the kind of man my grandfather was. He took care of his family. He did it the slow way. He did it the right way. I would like the chance to do that. With my sister. Above ground. In the light of day." The courtroom was very quiet. Judge Henderson looked at him a long time. She looked at Marin. "Young lady, is this what you want?" Marin stood up. "Yes, ma'am. He is my brother. He is the only family I have. I would like to stay with him." The judge looked down at the papers on her desk. She signed 2 of them. She set the pen down. "Petition granted," she said. "Mr. Mercer, you are hereby awarded full legal guardianship of your sister, Marin Mercer. The court will retain jurisdiction for review at 6 and 12 months. Good luck to you, son." Wyatt could not speak. He nodded at the judge. He sat back down. Atticus Vaughn put his hand on his arm. "That's it, son," the old lawyer said quietly. "That's all of it." Summer came. The lumber arrived the 2nd week of July. A flatbed truck from a mill outside Beckley ordered through Hollis. 2x4s, 2x6s, 6x6 posts beams. Sheets of plywood, bundles of cedar shingles. Hollis came up the fire road behind the truck in his Ford. 2 of his nephews came with him. Big, quiet men in their 40s, carpenters by trade. They did not charge. Wyatt tried to pay them. They would not take it. The older one, whose name was Calvin, said, "Son, your granddaddy framed my mother's house in 1991 when she came back from Cleveland with 3 kids and no husband. He worked 30 days. He never billed her. You are not paying us for this. Don't ask again." They built the cabin on the south slope of the clearing. Above the bunker, 2 rooms and a loft. A cedar shake roof. Big windows facing the valley to the east so the morning light would come in. A wood-burning stove on the north wall with a brick chimney that Calvin laid by hand. Wyatt worked beside them every day from sunup to sundown. His hands blistered. His hands bled. His hands by the end of the 2nd week started to look like the hands of a man who worked. The blisters became calluses. The calluses became part of him. He learned to drive a 16-penny nail in 3 swings. He learned to read a level. He learned how a roof goes on the long, careful way shingle by shingle from the eaves up. Marin spent her days on the cleared ground in front of the rising cabin sketching. She drew the men working. She drew Calvin's brother laying floorboards. She drew her own brother on the ridge of the roof against a blue sky hammer. In his hand, sweat dark on the back of his shirt. She drew the cabin itself day by day, as it grew up out of the dirt. Hollis came up most evenings with a thermos of coffee and a paper sack of sandwiches. He sat on a folding chair and he watched the work. He did not say much. He did not have to. Once on a Saturday in early August, he turned his head and looked at Wyatt, who was rolling tar paper across the roof in the late sun. "Your granddaddy would have liked this," Hollis said. Wyatt stopped what he was doing. "Yes, sir," he said. "I think he would." Winter came. The cabin was finished by the second week of October. Solar panels on the south slope of the roof wired to a battery bank in a small lean-to off the back. A composting toilet in a separate small structure that Calvin had built in 2 days. A real kitchen with a propane stove and a deep porcelain sink, and a window over the sink that looked out at the eastern ridge. A wood-burning stove that drew well and held heat through the night. The bunker was still there beneath them. Wyatt had built the front porch over the hatch. The porch boards were removable. The bunker had become the cellar. The shelves of mason jars were still full. The cot was still there. The footlocker was still there with its letters and its tapes. It was no longer a place to hide. It was a place to keep the past safe. The first snow came on the 3rd of December. It came in the early afternoon. The flakes were big and soft, and they fell straight down through still air. Wyatt was on the porch splitting kindling. Marin came outside with 2 ceramic mugs, cocoa with marshmallows. She handed one to her brother. They sat on the porch swing that Wyatt had hung from the rafters 2 weeks before. They watched the snow come down across the valley. Wyatt thought about a lot of things that afternoon. He thought about a clock on a wall going to 4:17 on a gray afternoon in May. He thought about a ladder dropping into the dark. He thought about an old lawyer in a gray suit in a courtroom in Charleston. He thought about a black Cadillac going east on Route 28 in the long gold light. He thought about Vance Calder, who, according to the letters Atticus Vaughn forwarded once a month, was scheduled to begin a federal trial in Pittsburgh in March on charges of racketeering money, laundering, and witness tampering. The case was strong. Atticus thought the conviction would carry 20 years. Wyatt would not be in the courtroom for that trial. Wyatt was done with that. On the small wooden table inside the cabin by the window there was an envelope. It was a plain white envelope. It was addressed in his careful printing. Reed Mercer, P.O. Box 417, Bozeman, Montana 59715. The envelope was sealed. It had no stamp on it. It had been sitting on that table for 3 weeks. Inside it was a single page. Wyatt had written it the first night the cabin had electricity. He had not shown it to anybody, not even Marin. The letter said 3 things. It said, "We are alive." It said, "We are safe." It said, "We are in Northwood, West Virginia. The address is below. If you want to come home, you can come home. We will be here." He had not mailed it yet. He did not know if he was going to. Marin leaned her head against his shoulder on the porch swing. The snow came down. Somewhere on the ridge a crow called once and was answered. "Wyatt," she said. "Yeah." "Are you going to send it?" He did not answer for a while. He looked out at the falling snow. He thought about a man across the street behind an oak tree, watching a small boy rake leaves who had gone to his grave with one regret and had told that regret to his grandson so that his grandson would not make the same one. "Yeah," Wyatt said. "I think I'm going to send it. Maybe in the spring." "Why the spring?" "I want him to come home in the spring. If he's going to come home, I want there to be leaves on the trees." She nodded against his shoulder. "That sounds right." He drank his cocoa. The snow kept coming. The two of them sat on the porch swing together with the cabin warm behind them, and the bunker safe beneath them, and the long blue ridges of the mountains rising white in the falling snow. And somewhere far down the valley a single light came on in a window. And Wyatt Mercer thought about his grandfather, and he thought about a key, and he thought about a map, and he thought about a ladder going down into the dark, and he understood for the first time in his life that he was home. The light through the cabin window was warm and yellow on the porch boards. Inside on the table the unsent letter waited. Outside the snow came down. And Wyatt Mercer, 18 years old, kept by his grandfather and kept by his sister, and kept by the slow, patient work of his own two hands, sat on his porch and watched the world go quiet. And he was not afraid.